Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inspiring Hope, the show that shines the light on people who are making a difference in our world. I'm your host, Lois Hermann, and today I'm delighted to have a wonderful functional medicine and magnetic wellness specialist on, Stacey Pare. She's full of all kinds of information. She takes a holistic, collaborative approach to health coaching, providing an individualized and science-based approach. Is that right?
That is right. Right from my website.
Exactly. So tell us a little bit about you. You've got such a rich background in both science and holistic wellness. How did your journey lead you from traditional physical therapy into the world of functional medicine and biomagnetic therapy? Tell us your story.
Yeah, well, that is a long and nuanced story, much of which Lois knows, that I will share for the rest of you that are joining today. So I am by background a physical therapist. That's my clinical background, and did a lot sort of through that career path for landing where I am now. In the midst of that, my daughter, her name is Lainey, who Lois knows very well, had a pretty debilitating battle with tick-borne illness. She had Lyme and babesiosis, Bartonella, and she was very sick for a long time. So we do what we do as moms, right? And all of my resources at that time were thrown into really getting her well, which I'm happy to report that she is, and she's doing great. But it really did change my trajectory in terms of my career pretty significantly. So at the time I was working in home care, really in the traditional space, and COVID hit. Kids were home from school. I was working 70 hours a week and also trying to get my daughter better. And so that really led me. I went back to school for functional medicine certification. And I ended up getting trained in something called biomagnetic therapy, which was a really important alternative modality for her healing. And then 1 year later, I opened my own practice. And it's been just an awesome journey so far to be able to help people in the way that we were helped by so many amazing practitioners.
So explain to the average person, what does functional medicine mean?
So functional medicine is really what I like to consider root cause medicine. So our traditional medical system is very geared towards what I would consider symptom management and pretty pharmaceutically driven. And I'm not a purist. I feel like sometimes pharmaceuticals are warranted, but we're very quick to throw drugs at symptoms without really doing the deep dive to figure out what might be causing the symptoms. So my interest is really in helping people and working with people to really get at the root of what's driving their symptoms. And if we can intervene at the root, quite often you don't need pharmaceutical care, or you might not need a surgery, or whatever our traditional methods are. So that's not to say that they're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you need both, but the body is innate in its wisdom. And somewhere along the line in Western medicine, we have become very disconnected from our bodies. And this is really about trying to help people dive down and figure out what's driving the symptoms. And that could be physical, it could be mental, it could be emotional, it could be environmental. There's so many things that affect our health. So it's really about big picture. But I do have relationships with a lot of physicians and, work collaboratively when that's warranted. So it really just depends on, what the client is struggling with.
And so that's the functional medicine part. What about the biomagnetic therapy? And I'm quite familiar with that, having been somewhat the guinea pig some years ago when it first made its presence known. And so tell us about biomagnetic therapy. It's kind of almost mystical. So
it is almost mystical and yet scientific, right? Because when we think about magnets, we use magnets in, an MRI as a giant magnet, right? So it's interesting when we talk about biomagnetic therapy and sort of using it as a healing modality that, people are like, what are those magnets? And I'm like, magnets are actually used quite often in medicine. But essentially, what we do with magnets is we scan the body. And when I say scan the body, we do that bioenergetically through a method called muscle testing. And really, through that process, the idea is that we're trying to uncover pathogens, viruses, infections, toxicity, mold, things that could be, affecting the system in a physiologic way. And then we literally use magnets, high-powered magnets. These are not fridge magnets in biomagnetic pairs, so positive and negative pairs across systems in the body. So we do sort of work on meridian systems. And by using a biomagnetic force, we actually have the ability to kill pathogens. So it's something that was, and Lois knows this, but was a really cornerstone hallmark of my own daughter's healing journey, which is how I was exposed to it. And when I was thinking about, my gosh, what does the world need? What do people need? This was a modality that really resonated with me, which is why I ended up getting trained, and now I'm able to provide it for other people the way that, we were able to utilize it for her healing.
So, what kind of conditions or symptoms tend to respond most effectively to biomagnetic therapy?
So we do a lot with infection management. So all of the tick-borne infections, whether it's viral or bacterial or parasitic, a lot of viruses, so long COVID, Epstein-Barr, cytomegalovirus, herpes. Epstein-Barr is a big one. I see a lot of people with underlying Epstein-Barr that it's affected so many other systems in their body. Tick-borne illness is another big one that people come in for. Then we also do detoxification, liver detox, mold is a big one that we see, candida, parasitic infections. So really the hallmark of what I do is working sort of in the infectious disease space, but there are a lot of other things that you can do with magnets. We do sometimes do emotional healing with magnets because we know that emotions get trapped in our body, and sometimes the biomagnetic energy can really move those emotions out. So we do some emotional healing as well. So there's a lot of different applications for what we can do with magnets, but that's kind of that's the 30,000 foot view.
And a good question though is I have a lot of clients when I do my intake, I'll ask, have you ever had Lyme disease, tick-borne illness, or been bitten by a tick? Oh, I've had ticks, but I don't have any symptoms from it. And from what I understand, and having been in and around the tick-borne illness world for, oh goodness, over 10 years now, so many symptoms are hidden and they're unique to the person. So
Yeah.
can you talk about that? Because I try to convince people they'll have these different strange symptoms that they're not connecting to the fact that they've had a toxic exposure of some sort. It could be from the tick. It could, the people have never heard of Epstein-Barr. And yet in the tick-borne illness world, it's a very common disease or syndrome or whatever that's tossed around, that's spoken about. But the average person has no clue what that is. So can you talk a little bit about what happens to the allopathic Western blot test for the tick-borne illness? It's just a small percentage of people who are positively diagnosed with that test, but there's so many more types of pathogens that are infused by the tick, from what I understand. Can you talk a little bit more about tick-borne illness and how it disguises itself in so many symptoms?
It's so true. And I think what Lois is talking about is one of the biggest challenges in the Western world with even getting to the starting line, which is the diagnosis, right? There are many, many people that are suffering, that have been diagnosed, but suffered for many years and didn't realize it was tick-borne, or have all these other symptoms and they are going, from specialist to specialist to specialist, trying to get at the root. The root is really Lyme. So I think because Lyme disease, all of these infections, and when we talk about tick-borne infections, there are many, but the most common ones are Lyme disease, which is Borrelia, Bartonella, babesiosis, anaplasmosis. I'm going to toss Epstein-Barr in there because it's quite often comes along with tick-borne illness. They are insidious and they are stealth infections, and they can affect the body in many different ways. And the way that they might affect one person could be completely different than the way they affect another person. So I will give you some examples. I have seen people come in with tick-borne illness with neurocognitive symptoms. My daughter was a perfect example of that particular presentation, right? Memory issues, academic issues. I have also seen people come in with tick-borne illness that present primarily with what you would consider to be more psychological presentation, whether that's anxiety or OCD. I am a firm believer that all children that experience any kind of psych issue, whether it's anxiety or attachment or OCD or whatever, they should be screened for underlying infection. Rule it in or rule it out. And I think that that intersection between infectious disease, immunology, neurology, and psychology is really an emerging field. We're not there yet, right? Psychologists kind of stay in their box and infectious disease stays in their box, but the body is connected. Everything that happens in the body has the potential to affect the brain and vice versa. So, all the way to having a client that had, what we thought was dermatitis and scalp issues, which actually happened to be Lyme disease, or people that are losing their hair, or foot pain is another symptom we see quite a bit. So I think it's really important to know that tick-borne illness, when we think about Lyme, what we think about, because what's been put out there, in terms of medical education, is joint pain, right? That's what everybody thinks about with Lyme. That's just one symptom that not everybody even has.
Right.
Some people have Lyme that presents in a very, very different way. They do tend to be opportunistic infections, meaning they go to the weak spot. If you, for example, my daughter had a concussion the year before her diagnosis, and I think that was a weak spot for her, right? The brain was a weak spot, so that's where the infection ended up. So that's why it's tricky, and I think that's why a lot of times people are mismanaged, because they may go to see their PCP and maybe they have gut issues. Maybe it's infection based, but they kind of, you end up going down the GI route, and if it doesn't fall into the GI bucket, then you're kind of left with, what's driving my symptoms. So it's important for everybody. And I think you see things through the lens of the world that you live in, but I think everybody should be screened, right? But then you get to the second challenge, which you alluded to, which is that our current diagnostics specifically for tick-borne illness are not very good. There's a very high false negative rate. And unfortunately, the higher level testing, when we talk about serology or lab work, is out of pocket for most people. So if you go to your PCP and they run a, Western blot or an ELISA, if it's negative, in my mind, that doesn't necessarily mean it's negative. That means that maybe you should do more testing. If it's positive, then great. You have a positive and you don't have to go to the extra step. But if it's negative, we've seen so many people with false negatives through the first line testing that got higher level testing and it came back positive.
And I know that you've seen some major transformations in clients that really felt truly a miraculous, life-changing event from going through the biomagnetics. Your daughter is one that I was part of that team to help her through, again, because of the mind. What happened, what I observe with people with Lyme is they're so conflicted because the symptoms don't fit a specific box. And so then they start feeling less than, what's the matter with me? Their brain starts going into this gyration of there's something really wrong with me. So therefore, then they have self-doubt, which then creates even a bigger cycle of lack of thriving. That hits on the mental emotional aspect, which is where I came in with the hypnosis and also the spiritual aspect too, of the body being so weak that it ends up, the spirit aspect of the body ends up dragging really, really badly. So
exactly. And that was such a huge part of her healing, being able to tap into that sort of soul piece, spirit piece, and, and have her on some level understand that there was a path forward and that there was hope. And, I think it's really tricky when you're sick to maintain that. So Lois was an enormous part of our personal healing journey, and we're really grateful.
So what kind of miracles have you seen with your clients?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel blessed because I've seen so many, and I, work with a lot of really sick people. I had one gentleman that was having seizures pretty badly, and he ended up having babesiosis infection and Lyme as well. And we have been able to get him, and not just myself, because I always work in a team, back to full function, thriving. He's now working in Texas. He's commuting back to the East Coast. And this was a gentleman that I remember coming into my office and laying on my floor. He was completely debilitated, not functional, not able to engage in life in any way, has two children and a wife. So the magnets were a really, really big part of his healing journey. Not the only thing, right? There were a lot of things that we were doing to support the body outside of that. Some herbal antimicrobial, some homeopathy, some detox, but it was really about supporting the underlying terrain to heal while we were dealing with killing off infection. So that's just one example. I feel like I have the blessing of seeing, I guess, what you would call miracles every day, right? Because I see a lot of people get better, and it's all about acknowledging what people are going through and walking the journey with them, knowing that it's not going to be an easy journey to walk for most people, but that healing is possible. And it's not easy for a lot of people, right? Because these infections can really, really wreak havoc on the body. But if we peel back the layers of the onion, healing is really possible.
And that was one of my other questions is how do you work? You say integrative medicine.
Yeah.
How does that integration work with your clients? How would you describe that?
So most of my clients, because of my functional medicine business, most of my clients, not all, some just come for magnets and that's all they want and we just do the magnets. But 90%, you would actually be one of those people that, is just more of like focused on the magnets. But I would say most people I'm doing a lot more. So
Mhm.
that an example of that would be maybe somebody comes in and there's underlying Lyme, but there's also some gut things that we need to look at. So for that client, we do know that if the gut is very connected to the microbiome specifically is very connected to our body's immune system and your body's ability to heal. So we might do a GI map on a person and figure out what's going on in their microbiome. We might do food allergy testing to determine if their body is fighting environmental factors that are dragging down the immune system, that if we alleviated those would help them to heal. We will sometimes do detoxification programs on people if they have had a mold exposure, for example, or have been in a toxic environment. If that's the case, you need to have detox support in order to heal. So for most of my clients, we are really looking at trying to do all the pieces to support the body for healing, and that almost always goes above and beyond just the magnet piece.
Hmm. And so what if someone feels stuck in chronic illness or fatigue? What would be the first small step that they could take to begin shifting their energy and reclaiming vitality?
I think that's so individual because it really depends on the client,
Mhm.
right? And so what's affecting any given person is very unique. So I do an interview and I do a pretty extensive history with most of my clients to really get into the depths of that. And I don't mean to be vague, but I'm just going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I've had clients before that have been in really difficult home situations, whether that's a marriage, an unhappy marriage, a toxic situation at home. And sometimes for those clients, it's figuring out how to help them and support them get into a better psychological and emotional state of mind so that the body can even have a fighting chance for healing. If you are in what we call a sympathetic state, which is a state of stress all the time from an emotional and psychological standpoint, it's going to be very difficult to heal your physical body. So that's one example of, right, for that person, that might be step one. For
Mhm.
somebody else, they may come in and like things are great in that realm, but they're living in a moldy house,
Right.
right? So for that person, step one is going to look completely different. I might have another person. I had a lady yesterday who's came in completely dehydrated. She doesn't drink water,
Mhm.
right? Well, step one, we just need to work on hydration. So I don't think there's one step that resonates with everybody. It really depends on the person and what's unique to them and what's the biggest factor and the easiest factor to start with.
And so that's where the whole functional medicine piece comes in, where you're looking at the whole person and not
Exactly.
specific symptoms that fit a script.
Exactly. Exactly. And we know right? From a scientific standpoint and just anecdotally from working with so many people with infection, I know what those infection profiles look like.
Right.
But everybody's individual in terms of their bio-individuality, in terms of their environmental health, their emotional health, their psychological health, all of that is very individual and unique. And I'll even throw another one at you is the genetic piece,
Mm,
right? Sometimes we have people with genetic SNPs that make it difficult for them to detox.
mm,
So there are so many things. I think health and healing is actually very complex because it's so individual. And that's where the functional medicine piece comes in, and really looking at everybody that walks through my door, comes into my practice, is a unique person with unique stuff. And all of those things can either be neutral, promote healing, or detract from healing, right? So my job is to increase the things that promote healing, to decrease the things that are going to detract from your healing, to give the person the best opportunity for that.
beautiful. So, what do you love most about the work you do?
I mean, I just love being able to help people. At the end of the day, I think I've been a healer, per se. Even when I was in the, more traditional PT world, I truly love to just help people. It's really, really rewarding for me. People that get into this work don't get into it to get rich, We get into it, for the other riches it provides, which is truly being able to help people. And I think for me, there's no ego whatsoever involved in this. For everybody that I work with, I want them to feel better. And if I'm a vehicle for that, great. But if I'm not, or if I know we need other people with other expertise or other modalities, then you can bet I'll be pulling those people in, right? And I have a lot of people that I work with the team, or I work with naturopaths because they do need some pharmaceutical in order to promote their healing. So for me, it's just really the reward of being able to help people. And having been through this, and I know that Lois and maybe some people that are listening would relate, when you're not well, whether it's you or a family member, it's a very lonely journey. And I remember going through this with my daughter, and I've said this to Lois a million times, like, you were a lifeline for us, right? There were angels along the way. I will always remember and be deeply, deeply indebted to. And it was never about, when we came to say Lois, it was never about, Lois, you're going to, fix all the things. It was that Lois is going to walk beside us and hold our hand and help walk this journey with us, right? And so to have the honor to be that for someone else is pretty amazing. And I never say that nobody has all the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I do my darndest to do the work, to do the best that I can for the people I work with.
And it is so rewarding. Just
It's so rewarding.
watching the change in Lainey, and here she
Yeah.
is getting ready to go to college. When I saw her years ago, she couldn't even read,
She
right?
couldn't read, she couldn't write her name, she couldn't count,
Yeah,
because the infection had such a detrimental effect on her brain. And it went on for years. There were times when we didn't know what her future looked like. And now she's applying to college, and, she's doing all the things that we would hope normal young adults would do. So,
miracles and blessings and
yeah.
miracles. Yeah, and
And
she
I feel like her journey in and of itself it's miraculous. It is a miracle,
it is.
in a way, but there were so many people along the way that made that miracle happen, right? It just didn't happen out of nowhere. So we had a lot of great, I always say for her graduation party, all the healers are coming. All the healers are coming, so we can say our thank yous.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And what about
Yeah.
you? How have you personally evolved through this whole healing journey, through witnessing others and your own daughter to heal? Because as a mom, helping your children through when your children are going through crisis, that so consumes your whole world. So
Yeah.
watching
It does
her.
consume, yeah,
Mhm.
it does consume your whole world. And you remember those days when I was
Oh
coming
yeah,
into your office and I was
yeah,
like, and I had another job, and you're trying to do all the things outside of just get your child better. I mean, for me, it's completely changed my life, right? I mean, it's become my work. If you would have asked me 20 years ago, I didn't even know this world existed. Even
right.
when my own daughter was diagnosed, I was like, what's babesia? Right? So you get a drinking through the fire hose indoctrination. And I would say anybody that's gone through any kind of difficult health issue becomes the expert, right? Like you become the expert on all the things. And I saw somewhere on TV, I think I was watching it was one of the Lyme movies, and I don't remember the name of it, but one of the things that someone said in that movie is a worried mother is more powerful than the FBI,
Mhm.
right? And there's a truth to that, you
There
know,
sure is.
even more so than if it's yourself. Like if your kid is suffering, you're going to do everything you can to turn over every stone to get them better. And through that journey, my mind was so open to just this world of infectious disease, specifically tick-borne illness, where the ticks of, you know, the 60s that I was bit by ticks growing up in the 70s, they're not the ticks we have today.
Mhm.
Right? These ticks are loaded with multiple pathogens. People are getting very, very, very sick. And so for me, it's just completely evolved my work.
Mhm.
It's evolved me as a person. I feel like I have a lot more grace than I had. And maybe that's just aging and getting older. I don't know. You know, and it's just much more important to me at this stage in my life to do meaningful work and to always push myself forward so that I can be the best for other people, whether that means going to continuing education or learning a new technique or whatever. Lois knows me. It's like, you know, I'm doing all the, she comes in, I'm like, oh, I'm doing this new thing. You know, it's like doing a new thing.
Yeah.
But that for me is fun, right? Because I just want to be able to, you know, stay on top of the research, stay on top of people that are really doing the cutting edge things and doing the work to evolve as healers. And my work is very much because I'm a very intuitive person and empathic person, and it's very much a combination of this scientific brain that I have and my holistic healing sort of intuitive side.
I hear you. That's the reason that I do what I do is because of my children as well. And it
Yeah.
who was to know that it would evolve into doing this type of niche type of hypnosis? But
Yeah.
we our children are our greatest teachers.
It's
And
really true. It's really, really true. And I do believe that this was our path, right? This was as I've gotten older, I don't believe that anything could have changed the journey
mhm,
that, you know, that my daughter went through, that I walked through with her, because the end result of that is there's another person in this space that's able to shine a light on this issue and help people that are struggling to get help. And I think there's a lot of people out there, whether it's, you know, whether it's Lyme, tick-borne infection, or just people that aren't feeling their best selves and aren't getting what they need through the traditional system.
100%. Yeah. And what message of hope would you like to share with those that are listening who are seeking true healing, body, mind, spirit? What would
I think the message of hope that I would always want people to hang on to is there is hope. And even in your most hopeless times, it's a moment in time.
you?
And sometimes I think back to some of those, we call them the dark nights of the soul, right? Like you feel like there's no way out. And there almost always is a way out. So if you can hang on to hope and surround yourself with people that are going to uplift you, healing is possible. And I don't just mean physical healing, right? Whatever you're going through in your life, there's always hope and there's always a way through. And sometimes, you know, the only way to the other side is through.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, and when I look back even on our journey, I mean, anybody I could talk to that would give me hope. I talked to, right? Lois was a big piece of our hope, but there were also people that I was introduced, Christine being one of them, right? Through the journey, other people that had sort of amazing healing stories that I would be like, just go to coffee with me. Like, I just want to hear your story because I needed that hope. And sometimes that carried us through
Mm-hmm.
when we didn't have the answers.
Other mothers,
So,
a lot of times it was other mothers who were going through something similar and
exactly,
could support one another on
exactly.
the journey. Helping our children is critical.
Exactly. And I had so many of those moms, and, you know, I hope I'm that mom for other people now, right? But I had a lot of those moms. So a lot of this is like also paying back what I received, you know, being able to pay that forward a little bit and, you know, and also going in authentically. And I think, you know, my experience with you and Janelle, who is our biomagnetic therapist and was a huge part of our healing journey, is, you know, authenticity is important. Like, you don't have to tell people that you have all the answers, right? Maybe I don't have all the answers, but I'm going to do my personal best to help people get to where they need to go. And sometimes just that is such a relief for people, like I never expected the team we had to have all the answers. I just asked them to, walk by my side and do the work to help us. And ultimately that's what it was. It was a collaborative group of amazing people, and even our naturopath, and it was just an amazing human being. And sometimes we were on the phone, he was like, I don't know if this is going to work, we're going to give it a try. And having those people around you that are just willing to be invested is everything.
And I know you've got a lovely office in Newburyport.
Yep.
However, I refer people to you often that you could at least advise, because biomagnetics is a new technique. It's very prevalent in New England or in New Hampshire, Massachusetts area anyway, Vermont, but it's just making its emergence across the country. And you
Yeah,
have a network of people that you can refer people to.
I do.
So,
Yes,
so
absolutely. So the best way to get in touch with me is through my website,
mhm,
which Lois will put out there. And there's a contact form. That's probably the best way because I'll get a direct email. But yeah, I'm happy to help people connect the dots and get to another practitioner if they're not close. And sometimes I also do consulting for people that maybe don't even come in for the magnets. And I'm going to give you an example. I have a few people that it's just Lyme consulting. They have a physician, they have people they're working with. They just like me to look at their plan and say, what do you think? Where should we go next? Are we missing anything? And so I just sort of function as a consultant in that I do remotely. So I do that work as well.
beautiful. And so it's
Yeah.
synapsewellness.com. Where did you come up with Synapse Wellness? How did that?
Well, Synapse, so I am a neuro PT, right? It's my background. So synapses in the brain are the connections between the neurons when the nerves talk to each other. And so the idea of synapse is connection, right? Everything's connected. And, we talked about that a lot today as it pertains to our health. All the things are connected to our physical well-being. But that was a little bit of a play on my sort of neurological background and what I'm doing in work. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure people will really get a lot out of this podcast. Thank you, Stacey, for your time and for what you are doing for so many people. And if you enjoy, those of you who are watching, if you enjoy this type of a podcast featuring people like Stacey, please like, share on YouTube, Rumble. Please share our work. And let me know if you'd like to be on the show, because I love to feature people like Stacey who are making a difference in our work. So thank you so much, Stacey, for you. And give Blaney a big hug from me.
I will. I will. Thank you so much for having me on. It was my pleasure, and I extend that back to you. Thank you for you, because we're deeply grateful as well. And, just feel really blessed to be surrounded by all the people, even that I can't see on the podcast, but I can feel the energy of it, and I love it. So,
And
yeah.
I always like to end with encouraging people to look up, stay positive, and bring the light to someone today. God bless.
Thank you.